1, 2, 3.
Yep.
Wait a minute.
All right.
Are we missing?
Are we
no.
recording? Are we out over Zoom?
Oh, John's, okay, we've got all 5 commissioners here. Ms.
Right.
Brinkman, before we start, can we let the record reflect that this is being broadcast on YouTube? And if anyone in the public has any questions, to submit them in writing. We will answer them at the end of the regular business meeting prior to anything that we might do in executive session.
Thank you. I'll call the meeting of the commission to order at 3:05 p.m. And let's take attendance orally, so it'll be picked up on the recording. Mr. Gallagher,
I'm here.
Mr. Gooden,
Here.
Mr. Delaney,
Yes, present.
Mr. Walton,
Present.
and this is Mrs. Brinkman. And staff, will you identify yourselves?
Ray Fowler, Hamilton County Public Defender.
Catherine Ancona, Deputy Public Defender.
Jack Herbert, Administrator.
Vivian Zebrink, Assistant to the Public Defender.
John Kennedy, Director of the Common Pleas Division of the Public Defender's Office.
Thank you. Members of the commission and staff received the materials in advance, including the agenda. The first item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the Board of Commissioners meeting on June 4th, 2020. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll move.
Identify by name, you move, please, so we can pick it up. Vivian, you pick it up.
Victor Walton, I move.
Second.
Do I have-
I'll second the motion.
It's been moved in second. Is there any discussion, any corrections, additions? All in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed, say no. They're unanimously approved. Next are the regular reports. Mr. Herbert?
Yes, we've had, since our last meeting of June the 4th, we've had a number of staffing changes and additions.
Jack, can you speak up just a little bit?
All right, we've had a number of changes since our last meeting of June the 4th. We've had 3 promotions, 1 new hire, and then 2 of our student interns, their services ended for the juvenile grant program. And you can see the footnotes there going forward. Vacancy wise, we have 2 attorney positions in our guardian division that we're looking to fill. They are considered critical positions that Kim Helfrich is currently interviewing for. We have a vacancy in our felony division for a social worker, and the administration division has a vacancy for support staff, a court specialist. So those are the updates for staffing since our last meeting.
Questions about staffing report?
None.
Also received a report on assigned council activity. Jack, will you speak to that?
Yes, so this represents the assigned council payments and costs through half year at the mid-year point through June 30th. As you can see, when we compare each category of payments to the prior year through the same period, we have a savings of $350,000. Each of our main categories in the disposition area have realized decreases over last year, except for homicides, which are up, and that's been duly noted in the media that homicides have increased or on the rise since last year. So one of the items to mention regarding this report, the savings in assigned counsel will allow us to forego the furloughs that we had for staff. So as we mentioned in a previous meeting, all staff members were taking 1 day, a pay period without pay. So instead of an 80-hour pay period payment, staff we're receiving 72 hours now. Given the savings we've had not only in assigned counsel but other line items, we've lifted that furlough. So effective June 25th, all staff are back to full-time. Given the other savings we were able to accumulate, and we should meet the budget that the county has recommended given the COVID reductions. So we're in good shape there.
Jack, how long was the furlough in effect?
We had the furlough for 6 pay periods. So basically everyone realized 6 days without pay. And in comparison to other county departments, a number of other county departments had 2-week furloughs or more. So we were fortunate enough to, again, secure savings in other line items such as this assigned counsel, court reporters, experts, and some other training areas. We're going to maintain the hiring freeze going forward and eliminate overtime going forward, except for critical positions that need to be hired, particularly in the area of the Guardian Division, given the fact they have the vacancies, attorney vacancies that we do need to fill. So the Guardian Division is one exception to the rule.
Commissioners have questions about the assigned, that report.
Jack, one quick question. Is there any way that 6 days can be made up at the end of the year if there's a surplus?
As far as giving staff an opportunity to work those 6 days,
Correct.
no, we really wouldn't be doing that. We still need to maintain that savings going forward. Since those pay periods have already incurred, we wouldn't have the necessity to give them overtime or extra days of work.
Okay.
They're back on full schedule now.
Bill Gallagher.
But there is a possibility, depending on where we are at the end of the year, to consider bonuses. Isn't that right?
We really don't have a budget line item for bonuses, no. We did receive salary increases, as you recall, early in the year based on our approved budget, and this was before COVID. So what we did, we took our annual review of the prosecutors' attorney salaries for each division, and we made ourselves right. In other words, we now have pay parity with the current prosecutor salaries in every division. We had particular increases in the felony division for our attorneys there, but we compared each division in the prosecutor's office, as well as some positions in JFS for our social workers and guardians to get comparable salaries. So we made those adjustments early in the year, and we really do not have dollars for bonuses. That would have to be something that we would, have to look at the end of the year just to see what kind of dollars might be available. But we could entertain it, I guess.
That's what I was just going to ask. I mean, is that something at least that we can, throw into the mix to be aware of at the end of the year, if there's a way to make up for some of the lost money that some of these lawyers have suffered?
Absolutely. We could look into that. That's a good one.
Any other questions about that report?
No.
Let's move on to staff attorney clients and cases.
All right, similar to assigned counsel, given the fact that there haven't been indictments and that jury trials and bench trials have been on hold, we have a reduction to the number of staff attorney assigned cases and clients. We're down about 25% through mid-year when compared to the prior year. So it follows pretty much in suit with the assigned counsel, given the reductions in caseload and COVID-19.
We brought John Kennedy in specifically to talk about that, and particularly with regard to drug court, because I know there was a question about the drug court case numbers. John can talk about it, and Kathy's got some comments to make on it too. John, why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I did, on that report, I did notice the drug court case numbers were down more on average than any of the other parts of the assigned staff cases. A couple things that I think are responsible for that. One, we didn't have grand juries for the 2 weeks starting April the 6th, the 2 weeks starting April the 20th, the 2 weeks starting May the 4th. And the way those cases get assigned to drug court staff, they happen after the case has been indicted when they go to 585. So when there are no indictments coming through, a lot of those low-level drug possessions are not linked up to staff drug court until after they've been indicted. Also, a lot of F4s and 5s possession cases that would have been drug court cases were cited rather than arrested. We had a lot of walk-ins the past couple months, and there were a number, I didn't get an exact number, but there were a high proportion of capiases for people who didn't show up to room A. And when they didn't show up to room A, those cases obviously were not subsequently presented to grand jury because they're sitting out there in capias status still. That is another thing that I think is responsible for that reduction in the number of cases. And just anecdotally, the first couple weeks grand jury was back, we were trying to get a grasp on the rhyme or reason of the order of cases presented to grand jury. There didn't seem to be one, but what we did notice were there was it seemed like a higher percentage of low-level drug possession cases that were ignored by the grand jury. I don't have an explanation as to why that was, but I think that is also somewhat responsible for the reduced staff drug court cases. I think the numbers will increase. I have had my staff attorneys indicate there seem to be more cases coming through room A now because I think there are more people being arrested, and that's been true across the board. But I think those are the primary reasons why the drug court staff cases are significantly reduced compared to this point last year.
I think Kathy has some information about how the data is being collected also.
I thought that I had information that would reflect these numbers, but it does not. It went more to perhaps we are keeping much better records now, but this accounts for cases being assigned, not cases closed. But I think if you wanted an internal report based on how many cases our staff have, they'd be much more accurate now than they have ever been. That's it.
And do we keep that data, Kathy, or do we have to, are we going to do things differently? How's that going to work?
Absolutely. They will be, the numbers will accurately reflect the caseloads and the attorneys to whom they are assigned. And that has been going on, I think, at least since the beginning of this calendar year, for the first time perhaps in many years.
What caused that?
I think so. In most of our divisions, before the OPD changed how they reimbursed us for staff cases, the triggering event was the closing. And I don't think that was seen as a priority to actually do the paperwork to close out the drug court cases. And now OPD is triggered by us opening a case. And when we had the felony drug court director leave, I instructed her to make sure that everything was in order and accurately assigned to counsel, and I believe that happened.
Thanks for the explanation. Any other questions about those statistics, that report? Have we had any Fresh Start clinics? No changes to report, I
No
guess.
changes to report there. The clinic is still on hold pending the COVID situation.
No idea when they'll start up again?
Not really, no.
Okay. Any other questions about the reports? We'll move on to the financials, updated county financial and COVID-19 information. We were sent the 37-page reopening guidance.
Yes, and I I also participated in a Zoom meeting on June the 12th with the CARES Act funding reimbursement and expense tracking report. So all county departments have been asked to track all COVID expenditures, and we do that through our accounting system. And we're all supposed to track expenses, submit monthly reports to the county administration, and they will be reviewing those expenditures, and we'll get reimbursed from CARES Act funding that's been passed by Congress. So we continue to track those, and that will continue through until the end of the fiscal year to pick up credits for those types of expenses. So just wanted to give you information on how that data is collected.
Has the county actually divvied up that money that they got?
Well, it will be based on actual expenses incurred by each department. For example, safety expenses, expenses for supplies, for thermometers, masks, and other kinds of supplies and materials. So it's up to each department, track their expenses, show proof of payment, and will be reimbursed based on those total expenses. So they haven't actually distributed it yet, but it's pending this report that'll get audited at near the end of the year, probably by November, December.
Is everybody using the same criteria in all the departments? As to
Yeah,
what's-
absolutely. And that was the purpose of our Zoom meeting, to go over that, the categories that are approved. And that was conducted by county administration budget staff.
Okay. Question about the CARES Act reimbursement? Item B, I think you
And
told us.
we've already
return.
discussed the
Right,
staff returning to 80 hours. So that was the other item we started June 25th. But we will continue to hold off on filling non-critical vacancies in order to keep our budget on target with the projections we have. And you also received that guidance reference manual for COVID reopening, that 37-page guidance manuals. So that was included with the handouts as well.
any more questions about the financials, reimbursement, et cetera? All right, public defender reports and comments, right?
The first thing is to talk about our diversity recruitment and inclusion efforts. I think it was the last meeting, we talked about what we had started last year with Judge Grant and through the MLK Day seminar with Eric Ellis, and that went on hold. But we started up again in June, trying to establish an office committee. Kathy and I identified a person we wanted to head this diversity committee, and that person took about 10 days or so, and on June 19th, let me know that person did not want to head this committee, didn't want to be involved in running it. 2 days later, on Sunday, June 21st, is when I received the email that I believe you've seen about the offices, and me in particular, failure to address the issues that our attorneys of color face from all the trauma that's been going on, and our failure to participate in the nationwide march. In response to that, we've had several meetings. We've talked to people inside the office. We've talked to people outside the office. We're trying to get a survey put together. Kathy's been working on it, and we're trying to get an accurate survey to see what kind of interest people have and their willingness to be involved in this. My idea was that we would involve at least one attorney and one support staff person from each division, that might be the appropriate size of the committee. Whoever heads it would have control to do whatever they thought was best. I have some people from outside the office willing to come in and help us. I've reached out to Mark Stevens, who did the evaluation of our office. Was it last year or the year before? I'm waiting to hear back from Mark. And the next step is going to be getting the survey out to the entire office. I'm aware that there's frustration with a number of issues, and we're willing to address it.
Is the staff involved in preparing the survey to ensure that it asks about what they're concerned about?
have a draft copy, and I'm quite candidly plagiarizing some other surveys that were sent out, particularly by the city of Seattle, their race and social justice initiative. And then there was a statewide study done on the failures of the public defender for the entire state of Michigan. So I'm looking at that. I hope to get a draft out to management and some of the key stakeholders soon. But I'm looking at a broader expansion. We still need to address, obviously, the recruitment, retention. I think we also really need to look at whether we are addressing our staff needs. And then as an institution, what obligation do we have to fight systemic racism? So it's growing into kind of a bigger animal than I initially had thought it would be. But I hope to get the draft out to management and get some input from them and stakeholders.
And by stakeholders, do you mean?
Some of the external people, I'd be happy to share it with the commission.
Yeah.
Or any comments, suggestions.
And I take it it'll be open-ended so that if you don't ask specifically about a particular need or.
The way that I right now am thinking that it's going to go, it will go through SurveyMonkey, and there will be, for most of them, there are kind of graded answers: agree, strongly agree, don't have an opinion. And then there are some that are going to ask people to rate, what they think the top 3 priorities are for an institution facing racism. So it's going to be a combination.
We also want to find out what people's interest is in participating. We're not trying to force anybody on this committee who doesn't want to be there, but it's important that we have some people willing to participate for it to be meaningful.
Has there been a description of what this working group or committee would be asked to do?
That's one of the things that I think I am putting in the survey. What do you think the top priority of this group should be right now? Just to kind of get it off the ground. At the beginning of the year, I would have said recruitment and retention. And I think we've shifted away from that at this point, or we need to.
The initial person we approached, we said, this isn't limited to what we're thinking. We'd like your input as to what needs to be addressed through this committee.
If I can make 2 observations, one is a concern that we have a place that is diverse and inclusive and feels comfortable for each person to work in. So I think it's beyond just hiring and retention, but I get that part of it. Is there been maybe a reach out either to chief defenders, Ray, or through NAPD about experiences other chief defenders have had with trying to have a working group like this?
That's part of what I've reached out to. I also reached out, I'll identify, I reached out to Jim Johnson, who we talked at length and issues that he has seen when he was here and about his willingness to come back and help us. And he is willing to do so. He has relationships with a lot of the minority attorneys and staff.
But I'm thinking somewhat broader as well. Because obviously there are people from maybe other sort of groups that it isn't just racial that may feel a need to speak up. But I'm wondering about chief defenders. You're part of the Chief Defender
Right.
Association. I have to believe other chief defenders have engaged in this process before you.
Right. No, that's part of what we're ongoing doing still.
Okay. Thank you.
While that's going on internally, a part of what I read in the email was a desire for an immediate visibility of the public defender office or the chief or both in the protests that are going on, either with public statements or physical participation or whatever. What's going on in that regard?
Well, I made the decision not to endorse the June 8th march because of what Mary Moriarty had said. She's, of all places, she's the public defender from Hennepin County in Minneapolis. And my recollection is pretty clear on this from 3 years ago. This exact issue came up in Minneapolis. There was involved a Black Lives Matter protest that staff attorneys wanted to march at. And Mary took the position that the public defender offices sometimes represent the worst of the worst. And if the office had endorsed the march, that put the office in a conflict situation. If someone opposed to that group, they were defending. Mary's advice at the time was that attorneys should be free to march on their own, to take whatever political position they chose. But if they chose to do it on county time, on government time, it had to be, they couldn't be paid for that time. And that was the decision I made. And whether that was the right or wrong decision, that was the one I made. And apparently a lot of people were unhappy with that decision that I made.
Was it about the compensation or about the fact that the office would not take a public stand? What was the push?
Both, from what came back to me.
I think this demonstration on that Monday was a little bit different. It really wasn't about Black Lives Matter. It was termed a little bit differently, but it was also very last minute as well. There wasn't a lot of time, I think, for input before that event occurred. It sort of occurred over the weekend and took place on a Monday.
Right. And I didn't call Mary Moriarty. I guess I could have, but I clearly remember that was her advice as to the position the office should take, and that's why I took that position.
There was a debate nationwide among defenders in terms of whether or not public defender officers should be part of that demonstration. It wasn't Black Lives Matter. It was more in essence in terms of in support of it was a little bit different. It wasn't Black Lives Matter, but it was more about clients. But there was still a lot of debate I watched over the weekend about whether or not defender offices should be involved in that. There were 100 offices across the nation that chose in one form or another to be part of that that demonstration on Monday afternoon.
I had several conversations with John Rapping from Gideon's Promise,
Yeah,
and he
right.
indicated that offices were not consistent across the country.
Right. Right.
What is the sense of the commission about the Chief Ray making any kind of a public statement about the values of the office and how it fits into the current discussion going on about, racism in the system, in the criminal justice system? Talk about what you think about conflict or public perception or duty to do something like that, to speak publicly. I think that it's probably our role to give him some guidance or sense of what we think the role of the office and the chief should be.
All right, since no one's speaking, I will. I've been a big proponent of the fact that the office needs to be more engaged with the community in which we serve. And that means being out with areas all over the community, getting the message out in terms of exactly the kind of work that we do and how our clients are being affected. And I think there are opportunities, there have been opportunities in the last 3 or 4 weeks for the office to say things. I think it has. And I think that it needs to continue to do so when it talks about how issues affect our clients. And there's no reason why Ray shouldn't be part of that discussion while other agencies and other groups and other leaders are discussing criminal justice and criminal justice issues.
So since the early protests, government agencies, government elected officials, heads of agencies who are not elected, corporations, nonprofits, many have issued statements of principles and values that arise out of the examination of how the systems have been racist in the past and what you can do to change them. Is it appropriate for us to do something like that?
I mean, if I can say, I mean, on as to Ray and probably as to most of us, we are sort of uniquely situated to talk about how race impacts, indigent criminal defense in Hamilton County. So I think we certainly should have a voice in it. Ray, what are your thoughts?
Well, since I'm not an elected official, I've been hesitant. The Mass Defense Coalition met for 5 days out at the Corinthian Baptist Church. We met the pastor and the custodian, both saw what we were doing and commented how happy they were that these issues were being addressed out there. It's small, but that's the type of thing when we're seen in the community and we can talk about things. I guess just my nature, I'm a little more hesitant to make public statements because they come back and bite me, it seems like. And I want to do what's right for the office and what's best for the office. And it's an area I feel a little bit uncomfortable with, in all candor. I'm not afraid to meet people and to go places. The public statements, I don't always feel that comfortable making. That's being honest.
Does anyone know the answer? Have any of our neighboring public defenders, like the public defenders in Indiana or the public defender from Kentucky, Damon Preston, have they been making any kind of public statements?
I don't know.
I don't think Dana has been, John, I don't think Dana has been. I mean, there have been some county defenders in other states that have. I'm not aware of anyone outside of maybe our state public defender who's really talked much at all about issues of race in the criminal justice system.
Has the Ohio State public defender been making
Tim
many
knows.
public statements during this period?
During this period, I don't know if that, I haven't seen anything from Tim necessarily. I've seen things from Tim in the past.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if he said that. Kathy's got something.
He testified on behalf of designating racism as a factor
Oh, health.
for the health. And he did circulate to us. We can send it out to you. It obviously wasn't in person, so it was more of a written statement. And then their office did publish a
Good.
statement.
Good.
Okay.
Ray, have you been contacted by the papers for a public statement at all?
No,
No. Okay.
no.
Let me follow that up with saying, does the commission have an obligation, a responsibility, given our, what our duties are? Do we have an obligation, or should we speak out in some way as a group?
I don't think that's our role as commissioner. I think that, we really don't speak as a body publicly like that, do we?
Other than through our meetings? No.
Steve, what are your thoughts on this?
My thoughts are generally with Ray. I think, as I said at the last commission, I've been in the courthouse a fair amount the last month or so with other, with matters as it's sort of opening up. And the reports I get back about the office are uniformly positive. I'm very proud of how the office has handled this, particularly the creativity. A lot of the members of the office showed, and the extra hours and time they put in around the protests. Very much aware. I'm a downtown resident, of public to individual defenders who are involved in the protest. Right. But I would say this, we have a law firm that is almost precisely the same size as this office. And, we really struggled with this internally as well as to what our obligations were. And what we came back to was, we're not elected officials. We have clients to represent. We're in the client representation business, first and foremost. And our concern, and I think this would be, if I'm hearing Ray, his concern, is making kind of broad public statements that could somehow come back at us at some point and hurt us in terms of client representation. I think everyone knows where this office stands. I think it's done a great job. If public defender were an elected position, I think it might be a little different. If we were elected, I think our obligations might be a little bit different. But I think the community engagement's been great. I think going to the churches has been great. I think the expungement clinic has been fantastic. And it looks like some really good client service, has occurred here. So, I've never bought into the idea, frankly, of putting Ray in this sort of thought leader role. I think it's good that he's out in the public and talking and explaining our services, but I've always seen us more in the service provider role. That makes sense.
If I could join in, I think I would echo Steve's comments. Ray is first and foremost a lawyer, and he is in charge of the office. Our law firm is very large and has been very vocal in support of the call for change. And like Steve's is in the client service business. However, I think that's different than where Ray is. He is not elected. And I think by encouraging his employees, if they so choose to be involved, that's what his job is, going out among meeting the community individually. I think that's what he's done. And I think the record of the office, the expungement clinics, the efforts, that we continue in trying to hiring speaks to what we do. But for him to become, sort of out front, I don't know that that's what his job is as public defender or what I would see as his job. If he were elected, I think that's a different issue altogether. So I would tend to side with Ray and Steve.
What would you say, not as to Ray's job, but as to us as the commissioner's job?
You mean whether we would join, whether we would put
whether
out
we should put out a statement as the commissioners?
I think it would, personally, I think it's more appropriate for the commission to do so than for Ray to do so.
Would it be a statement explaining and supporting the performance of our staff in the effective representation of clients during difficult times, something like that? What we do on a day-to-day basis only intensified when all these challenges were presented, something like that.
I think that's great. I read, Ray, the motion you sent around for dismissal. I thought it was excellent. The basis of the emergency ordinance. I mean, to me, that is the public defender leading in his role. He is a lawyer and taking a role in getting the dismissal of those charged with violating the curfew. I think says volumes about where the public defender, the commission, and the office stands.
Well, let me add a wild card, and this is probably what caught me the most, was my fear of losing the support of the attorneys in the office by not participating. I knew it.
Real fear.
I knew it. I came in on Saturday. That Saturday, the march was on Monday, the 8th. I was here on Saturday for a couple hours working on something else. And Sammy Silverstein was here, and this was just coming through. At first, I didn't follow what it was. There was another march that people could attach to. Then it became individual marches, and I agonized back and forth. I guess on retrospect, I should have reached out to my entire management team. I don't know if we could have called a meeting with the commission. I wasn't sure what to do. And the response I got later made me feel like in their minds, I let them down. And that's what I don't want to do.
Yeah.
I absolutely don't want to do that.
Yeah, that will be detrimental to your ability to be the leader of the office.
Right.
I recognized it right away. I knew it right away. This was going to be a problem.
I think that there are some issues though that you have to lead on, and they affect all of our clients, and they affected the clients you're representing, right? We know what a lot of those are. We've been out there talking about bail, but we need to be talking about, you know, the inadequate number of minorities on our juries. We need to be talking about at times police misconduct from the viewpoint of the public defender's office. And I don't see necessarily that there's anything wrong with you speaking up on those issues while you're out in the community or while people are having discussions about criminal justice reform. We shouldn't just be sitting back and representing clients. We need to be at the forefront of demanding change where we see changes necessary on behalf of our clients.
And that is,
I mean, I agree.
yeah, that is different than deciding to go and take a knee or be part of the, it's speaking up and backing it up with action to make changes. Yeah.
But I you know, and it sounds a little weird, but I want to circle back. I think part of this is unfortunate that some people don't see all the other work that's being done in this office by representatives in this office. The number of things that Sammy Silverstein and John Kennedy and others have been involved in over the last 3 or 4 weeks, it's been hidden, I think, because we're not as visible as we should be. We should really be a little bit more visible for the public to see what you're doing. You know, there were public defenders on those steps of the courthouse yesterday, or the courthouse, and then in City Hall with that motion to dismiss, demanding that the charges be dismissed on behalf of 400 clients. They are part of a bail reform effort. There are meetings with coalitions of people throughout the community. No one knows that we're doing these things, and I'd rather us be in front of it than behind it, trying to explain it much later on. And I think there are ways to do that.
Part of what you're describing is our duty to educate the public
Absolutely.
about what we do, why we do what we do, and how it affects the system and tries to improve the system. So I agree. I mean, we might consider some kind of a resolution that takes that approach.
For what it's worth, I specifically asked Sean Vicente and Sammy Silverstein if they wanted me there with them. And they said no, that it was organized well enough that they had control of it.
Yeah.
Because I'm telling you, it's since June the 8th, I knew there were people disappointed in me in the office, very disappointed. I knew it. I felt it instantly.
Well, all you can do is you can go forward acting in a way that will reestablish their confidence. And you know, they have to be reasonable too, and about what they expect of you. But you have to be aware that part of your leadership is appropriately inspiring their confidence about being upfront on the issues publicly. So it's a choice about how to do it, I think. And I think the commission can probably help by maybe publicly educating the public a little bit about what especially has been important in our work during this tough time and how we pledge to improve the system as we go forward while effectively representing our clients. So you know, if you like, I will try to draft something and we can consider it at the next meeting. If it should be done sooner than that, let me know if we can take action on it, if you want to consider it sooner. Is there a consensus that we should at least consider something like that?
Yeah, absolutely.
I would say yes. Yes, from me.
Okay.
Steve, everyone, other commissioners?
Yes, from Victor.
Okay, Victor, good.
Yeah, I'm happy to take a look at whatever we come up with.
Okay. I'm happy to have your input. I'll do a basic draft, and I'm not sure how we do this and honor the open meetings law, but we'll figure it out.
You know, I hate to interrupt you all. I kind of have to go. We're on a boat, and the boat's going to go, and I won't be able to get off the island. And I'm sorry to do that to you. That's kind of a mistake on my part. Unless anybody has a big objection, I do kind of need to leave.
John, we're basically finished.
Okay. Okay. I can hang a couple more minutes if we want to wrap it up, or I have to go.
We've talked about diversity, including recruitment and hiring efforts. Any other topics before we
Just
set?
briefly, I sent out, I hope you all got it today, the jail population data.
Yeah.
What is it?
1,030 as of yesterday.
So it's up again?
It's fluctuated up and down the past month. It's up from March the 3rd or April the 11th, when it was down to 755.
Boys, don't leave without me.
I mean, that's almost a 50% increase.
Yeah. Yeah, that's bad.
They've stopped
next-
citing and started arresting again. Is that most of it, or?
Well, trials are supposed to start next week, but I don't know that it's going to happen or not, jury trials. I haven't had any follow-up since John and I met with Judge Kubicki and Mark Pietmeyer and Andy Gillen, Pat Dressing and them. I understand 2 of our attorneys have juries scheduled next week, but whether they go or not, I'm not sure. I mean, that's some of these cases have to get resolved to get that population down.
Yeah.
Is it true, John? Do you know in the jail population rumors, we're now up to about 25 COVID positives are secluded? Is that about right?
Yeah, I had
John, make sure it's in neutral.
the today I guess it would be the NAF care part of it.
Prime it a little bit.
62 tests, 24 positives. So I don't know if all those 24 positives are currently in the jail. I know they are. I talked to Captain Kerr this afternoon. They do have people isolated on North 4th floor and North 5th floor. And they are putting in some new precautions for, trying to keep those people better isolated, because I know we've had some contact that should have been avoided, just because I think the sheriffs just weren't aware. Somebody wasn't aware that somebody was positive with COVID. But yeah, that's the number I have. I don't know how many are still incarcerated. I would guess most.
18 are in POP.
Thank you, Kathy. 18 up.
And I don't know if all the commissioners know it or not, but the city prosecutor's office is not operating this week because one of their attorneys got COVID. And Sammy told me it was so disappointing today, they weren't even calling off their witnesses. They just said, we're not coming.
They told off all the police officers, though.
So I
Really?
don't know. I don't know if those cases have been continued now or dismissed or what.
Continued for the most part.
How did they notify the public defender office?
I think.
Sean got a call or text on his cell phone from Tim Horsley from the city early on Monday morning.
So right before everything was supposed to happen. Wonder when they called the police officers.
I don't know. I'm stunned that they didn't. Maybe they did try to ask the county prosecutors to help cover, but apparently there's no coverage. It's just nothing.
So your attorneys
No, they
feel,
call every call. I've been in
go ahead, Bill.
over the last day and a half, 2 days, I've probably been in 7 different municipal courtrooms. They called all the courtrooms and just asked the courtrooms to continue the cases. Their position is at least until the end of the week. The troublesome thing for me going forward is this. It's a lawyer that was in a courtroom, who worked in the courtroom, who tested positive.
Yeah.
The reason, and I know for a fact there are other city prosecutors who were at a sort of an impromptu meeting in the city prosecutor's office that violated social distancing standards. And the city's policy is once each of those lawyers produces a negative test, they're required to come back to work, which is completely contrary to what public health experts are saying in terms of what they should do when you were exposed to someone.
Yeah.
So the potential is beginning on Monday. city prosecutors are going to be back to work in courtrooms only with a negative test result indicating that they're somehow safe to now interact with people.
Without quarantining for 2 weeks. Yeah.
We have two county prosecutors who work side by side, the infected city prosecutor, who were just told the same thing by the county prosecutor's office, which is go get tested. But once we get your test, you then have to come back to work, as opposed to quarantine, which is completely contrary. I'm concerned about public defender staff having to now interact with infected city staff. You're doing everything you can to keep people separated, but starting on Monday, you're going to now be asked to expose your staff to people who should be quarantined. They shouldn't be at work. They shouldn't be in the courtroom. And I think, quite frankly, a letter to the presiding judge in municipal court should probably be sent out saying that that's a genuine concern, that the city's going to allow possibly infected people prior to the expiration of a quarantine back to interact with courtroom staff when we're supposed to start doing jury trials and things like that. I think it's possibly irresponsible to let people come back to work who haven't served out their quarantine time.
Ray, if I could lean in, I know the county health department, was deeply involved in the new jury protocols and so forth. Before we're writing more letters and stuff, maybe you should just call them and see if it's an issue. I mean, I talked to some of the folks at the city prosecutor's office this morning. I mean, as long as the individual is socially distanced and have a negative test, I'm not quite sure I see the need for the 14.
Steve, they weren't socially distanced at the time of the exposure. I mean, the problem is the people that are going to be tested are people that fall within the guidelines of having been prolonged exposure of 15 minutes or more within 6 feet. Okay. That's the exposure. The city's decided that the response says, as long as you have a negative test after that exposure, you're safe to return to work. That's not what experts are saying. Okay. They're saying you should be quarantined for 14 days after that exposure is what you should be.
Okay.
Now
okay.
But the public defenders are now being asked to now interact with those possibly positive people starting on Monday. Not jury trials, just interaction in the courtrooms.
All right, with masks and social distancing and all other sorts of things. I just think asking the public health folks might be the way to go. I appreciate your passion on the issue, but I'm just suggesting a point of view.
I understand that, but you don't bring back people who are potentially positive and then say social distancers, have them just wear a mask. People who are potentially positive should be quarantined. They shouldn't be back out in public, especially in tight sort of quarters in those courtrooms and in those hallways and everywhere else where they come into contact with people. We're exposing our staff. They're exposing a lot of people by coming back to work much earlier than they should.
Plus, they should do contact tracing. And I mean, that's the governor's order. You're supposed to do contact tracing in a situation like that if anybody tests positive. So
Who has jurisdiction over the courthouse? The city health commissioner or the county health department?
It's through the county.
I'm signing off, everyone. Goodbye.
Okay.
Take care, John.
Hey, John.
The county health does.
Well,
In fact,
you got to check with them first and then take appropriate action to protect the people.
Yeah, though it's in the city, there's a statutory provision that gives the county health department.
I mean, there are assistant city prosecutors who are not happy about the fact that they're being ordered to return to work with a negative test. They would rather be quarantined. The problem is they're going to be forced to take days off and they can't afford that. So it's not as if they're assistant city prosecutors who are real happy about the idea that they're going to be back interacting with people while they think they're still maybe positive.
I was also told today that one of the bailiffs in municipal court is positively identified with COVID. So I don't know how that's going to affect things.
It's fine.
All right. So Ray, you have our sense of it. Follow up on it with the health department and then take whatever action you need by call, letter, personnel decisions or whatever to protect your people.
All right. Steve, do you know who to talk to over there?
Greg Kesterman is the interim health director. Kesterman, Kesterman. He's the guy that was involved in the jury room selection and the, the screens they put up and all that.
And I have his info because I've interacted with him with our own personnel issues.
He's a pretty thoughtful.
All right, we'll get on this right away.
Is there anything in the 37 pages that talks about what the protocol should be when there's contact like that?
I don't know about if there was anything included in that, but the
Check it.
county has issued guidelines, the most recent of which put the onus on the employee to contact a healthcare provider and to follow the healthcare provider's instructions based on the employee's description of what type of contact they had with the person that's positive. And frighteningly, we do get a wide range of recommendations from healthcare providers about what our employees need to do. They have to fill out a return to work form from their healthcare provider, saying that they are allowed to come back to work before we let them come back to work. But that is what the county has advised us to do.
Even though the advice will be inconsistent from healthcare provider to healthcare provider, huh?
I don't know that people anticipated that, but that is what has been happening.
Sure. All right, any more discussion on that? Ray, any other reports or comments under your section?
Just that I sent that motion out that Victor referred to, the mass defense motion, that we're dividing the clients up with various public defenders. I think, was it 12 each person was getting? Kathy, do you remember?
That was
7?
my math. That would be about 12 per attorney.
Okay, and their numbers are down because of COVID, so the caseload is manageable from our point of view. Plus, there are private attorneys who've been involved in this and pro bono attorneys taking, so we're not getting all the cases. But the issues that are common to all of them are addressed in that motion, and then we'll go from there, and they've all been told that each of them will get the right to make their individual decision as to how to proceed with their defense. So that's where we stand on that.
And is the city prosecutor's office offering the various options?
Well, it's been out in the public. They won't release a liability on all these cases.
Yeah.
We think they're going to have significant problems of proof. And from what I've heard, they having a difficult time already trying to figure out which police officers were involved in which cases, because everything was generic that they did, and they didn't track who might have made an arrest. It's part of our zealous representation. We're doing the best that we can for all these clients.
It's very thorough, very thorough. Anything else?
You do deserve recognition in terms of your office staff, in terms of what you did with the community concerning those number of cases.
Yeah.
With over 400 clients, the idea of holding public forums out in the community at various hours. They were in the evening, they were in the daytime, and they were on the weekend before cases were assigned, so clients could come learn about the issues involved in their case and where the defense was going. I applaud. I mean, there were staff lawyers that were there on their own time outside of normal business hours to be accessible to people in the public, and I think your office deserves a lot of recognition for doing that.
Well, they did a nice job, and I have to say, Corinthian Baptist Church is about as centrally located as you can get on Tennessee Avenue, just east of Reading Road. It's a huge facility. There's ample parking there, and it's easy to get to. We might try to do more things out there. And like I said, the pastor's stepdaughter is Elizabeth Ty, the attorney Elizabeth Ty. And he was very happy we were there. So.
I bet. And he's collecting the money for the bail fund too, right?
I think so, yes.
Yes. No, that's a different, no, that's
That's
different.
Harmony.
That's
Oh,
Harmony.
Right, that's Harmony. That's Pierce, yeah, okay. All right.
That's all I know.
Ray, anything else?
No, so far as I know, there's nothing to go into executive session for unless the commission wants to. But I guess if we're not going to do that, we need to see if there's any questions. I haven't seen any on any chat, if anybody's submitted any.
Okay. Let the record show you've checked for any public questions or comments and none appeared. Shall we set a date for the next meeting?
That works.
Would it be reasonable to meet 1 month from now? Given the uncertainty of what happens every week?
Well, I think just be, if nothing else, a short meeting just to see where we are with your possible
Resolution?
resolution, yeah.
Okay. The 19th, Wednesday, the 19th?
In the afternoon, I'm assuming?
O'clock, yeah.
What time? 3? That'll work for me.
Victor, you okay? Steve?
That'll be fine.
John will probably still be in Michigan, but I'm sure he'll find a phone.
Yeah. All right. That'll work for you, Steve? 19th
That's
at 3.
That's fine.
Okay. All right. August the 19th at 3 p.m. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I would so move.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank
Any
you, everybody.
Do you have a boat to catch? I want to know if Steve has a boat to catch also.
Yes, I've got a boat to catch right now. Yes, I sure do. I generally have a boat to catch,
Okay.
Kathy. Generally.
Generally.
Who
Generally.
seconded the motion? Kathy, who
Uh,
seconded the motion?
Victor, was that you seconded the motion?
I did, yes.
You did, okay. And we
Okay.
unanimous, we all voted aye. All right. Thank you, commissioners. We'll see you next month. Stay strong, Steph. Stay strong.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye now.
Okay.